Hello and welcome to another episode of Having a Chat. My name's Tommy Casher, and today I'm chatting with Dan Ryan. Dan Ryan, newly appointed coach of the West Coast Fever, joining me from home quarantine over in Perth, mate. How you going?
Yeah, very well. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. And it's nice to be here in Perth, albeit stuck in a house. But I'm sure I can get out and enjoy some sunshine in just a matter of days.
Yeah, I'm sure you're counting down the days. So how long have you got left until you can go outside and enjoy that Perth sunshine?
10 days, 2 hours, 34 minutes. So we're not counting it all, mate. But I can feel the fresh air. I can feel it.
Just open the windows and get the breeze coming in. It's almost the same.
Exactly.
Dan, first question I always kick off with, what did you have for breakfast?
Baked beans on toast today. Haven't had that probably in about 6 years, but the cupboard is really bare at the minute. So all I found was a tin of baked beans and some frozen bread. So I made up a masterpiece. It was delicious though.
That's actually still a pretty good breakfast though, in terms of you got your protein, you got your carbs. What's a normal breakfast for you?
I'm normally not a huge breakfast eater, but my number one would always be like poached eggs and avocado. That's kind of my go-to, but you probably need a bit of spare time to do that a bit more often. So hopefully we can pick a bit of that up over the next couple of weeks.
What kind of relationship do you have with food? Are you like a good eater that sticks to a pretty good meal plan most of the time, or are you a bit of a binge eater? Where do you fit on the relationship?
Definitely a binge eater, and certainly something that I need to be better at, that's for sure. But when you're pretty busy and you're on the go all the time, preparation is critical. So sometimes I catch myself out and not being prepared, but certainly something that we can all be better at, I guess. But yeah, I don't mind the odd binge, but it can be a bit catastrophic, so you got to be careful.
Mate, you mentioned about being prepared. You know what I wasn't prepared for? Pressing
recording in progress.
I always record the Zoom and put it on YouTube, and that's what I didn't do. But now we're into it. What do you normally binge on?
Oh,
Sweet tooth?
my God. Honestly, now that I'm back in Australia, I'm going to be having as many palmies as possible. 3.5 years in the UK of not being able to get a standard trademark typical palmy is heartbreaking. So now that I'm back, as often as possible, I'm at the pub and slamming down a palmy.
Do they have schnitties over there?
They do, yeah, they do, but just there's no place like home, and you can't beat a dirty palmy with extra cheese. It's one of my go-tos.
But mate, speaking of the 3 years over in the UK, you've obviously recently caught a fever. How are you feeling?
I have actually, and it's not a COVID one, which is nice. But I'm very happy to catch a fever and looking forward to the journey ahead.
So how long ago did that process all start, and how are you feeling now that you're in it? You've got the job, you're over in quarantine, you're ready to get started.
Yeah, well, the process started off all the way back in March, actually, when Netball WA and West Coast Fever put out expressions of interest for the role to I guess, search the market and see what coaches globally might be interested in the position. And from there, it went from formal applications into 2-3 rounds of interviews, psychometric testing, some match analysis, presentations to the board, one-on-one meetings with key people within the organisation and other key stakeholders. So it was really extensive. And to be honest, it only finished up probably 4 weeks ago. So it's been going for a long, long time. But I really respected the process. And I actually, in a strange way, really enjoyed how thorough and detailed and long it took, because the whole purpose for a job like this is it's really up to the organisation to find the coach that is the right fit for them. And that doesn't mean that it's the best coach in the world or the most experienced coach or the one with the best track record. It's really about the attributes that person brings to fit what the team, the club, the organisation need at that point in time. And on the flip side, for me as the applicant, it was about discovering if Fever was the right fit for me to be able to thrive and reach my potential. So great synergy between both of us, and really happy with how it's landed, and absolutely know, wholeheartedly that it's the right place for me, and also very importantly, the right time in my career and life for this opportunity. So couldn't be more excited, mate.
Something that I'm really intrigued about, you mentioned you started the application process with expression of interest back in March. Do you go to someone at the Rhinos? Obviously you were with Leeds Rhinos this year in the Super League. Do you go to them and go, hey guys, just so you know, put my hat in the ring for the expressions of interest? Or are you, because I mean, everyone in their day-to-day life might apply for a new job while they're already in a current role. Were you keeping them in the loop the whole time, or how did that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And, they were really supportive, which was fantastic. And so not everybody knew, obviously, but the people that needed to know were aware of my circumstance. And obviously, I'd been at that point in time overseas for 3 years, and we were right in the midst of a global pandemic. So when a global pandemic hits and there's no easy access to get home at all, the pull to come home becomes even stronger. So, Rhinos are a great club in the fact that it's always people first, like it should be. And for me, my desire to get home to my family and get back to Australia and be closer to the ones that I love was really important. And so I went through the process and was very open with Rhinos about that. And they were very supportive the whole way. So I could have asked for a better employer to understand the circumstance. But I think, the pandemic too puts a lot of things in perspective, not just for organizations, but for everyone within it around what actually really is important. And for me, being so far away and the access of being able to get back to Australia, you're talking like the cost of $10,000 equivalent of flying home, and there's no such thing as an easy, quick trip back and forward to Australia anymore. And for me, that was becoming further and further away from being able to get home. So it aligned with me wanting to go home, but also taking my career to the next step too, and pushing myself and challenging myself. So yeah, very thankful for Rhinos for all their support.
So since 2018, when you left the Thunderbirds, you've coached Northern Ireland, assistant coach at Manchester Thunder, head coach Leeds Rhinos, obviously 2019 Netball World Cup, 2019 Netball Vitality Super League champions, took the Rhinos to the finals in their first season. So just had a pretty cruisy 3 years over there, did you?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good, to be honest. And I think when I left Australia, I had a choice to make whether I was going to quit coaching or whether I was going to really fight back and dig deep. And to be honest, I never, ever questioned quitting the profession. I always knew that the Adelaide experience for me was going to be the reason that saw success in the years to come. It was going to be for a reason, and it was going to be a catalyst for future growth. And when I left Australia, my purpose was to get as much diverse experience as possible in a number of different environments, a number of different roles. And the depth and diversity of my experiences is probably what's shaped me mostly over the past 4 or 5 years, because there's no point as a head coach being in one environment the whole time and only having a smooth ride. I think when you can have those challenges and those struggles and go to the depths of industry hell, which I'm sure I did a number of times over my career, that's the stuff that really makes you. And I think that's why I say I'm now ready for a job like this, because I've experienced so much in the industry and in the profession of being a high performance coach that I'm now equipped with the skill set, the wisdom, the knowledge, all of those things that actually require you to know to be able to thrive in a high pressurized environment and competition like Suncorp. So the last 3.5 years have been critical for my development. Absolutely.
You mentioned that you never contemplated quitting coaching, but what was your mental state like at the end of 2018? Were you having doubts if you were as good a coach as you thought you were? Like, obviously you've had netball ingrained in you since you were a young kid. Growing up in Geelong, you were involved in netball there. Then you've come up through the pathway. You even played men's netball for Victoria and then Australia and the captain of the Australian team. So you know netball, right? But were there doubts, and what was your mindset at the end of 2018?
Yeah, I think I had to do a lot of work to pick myself up after it. And it wasn't so much the netball or the coaching. I certainly knew that I had a lot of growth still within me in those elements, particularly from a head coaching perspective in managing programs and managing boards and all of those other elements that you are never prepared for until you're in the hot seat. But I was also able to remove myself and understand that, my experience at Adelaide was somewhat unique. Not all clubs or environments are like what I was in. And I had to accept that perhaps it wasn't the right place for me as a rookie coach. So accepting that there were some things out of my control there that I had no choice but to endure. But again, like I said before, those things are really important in your own growth, because if you're on survival mode for 2.5 years and you can get through it and then find a way in the coming years to thrive, it says a lot about, I guess, who you are in terms of your resilience and your commitment to your craft and those types of things. The biggest thing I probably struggled with after Adelaide was my own identity outside of coaching and being attached to a team as a head coach, because the 2.5 years in Adelaide were unbelievably relentless, and everything was Dan Ryan, head coach of Thunderbirds. I didn't have family or friends in Adelaide. There was no real support network that gave me an escape from my work. Adelaide's a pretty consuming city if you're a part of elite sport. So that was tough. And I probably struggled with feeling really lost at the end of it. And there was definitely an element of me that was desperate to go back to the UK to recapture what I knew the feeling was of thriving and being successful and feeling really good. But there's a huge lesson in there in high performance sport, and a lot of athletes will talk about, and a lot of coaches, is that you've really got to understand yourself deeply. And I did a lot of work on my own personal growth and development of understanding that I'm Dan Ryan first and I'm Dan Ryan, the coach, second. So I can connect those two people as I need to, and I can disconnect them as I need to. And just because I win a netball match, it doesn't make me a better person. Just because I lose a netball match, it doesn't make me less of a person. So that relationship, I guess, that I developed with myself and also the industry and my job is really healthy, because, I've got great respect for winning and losing equally. And if I hadn't had the experience or the ordeal at times that I went through at Adelaide, I wouldn't have got to that stage in my own professional and personal life. So everything happens for a reason, mate. And I'm certainly sure that the Adelaide experience was thrown at me at the very beginning of my career for hopefully what's to come in the future.
Since Adelaide, how far has the off-court side of the game in terms of players' mental health and well-being? I had Maisie Nankerville on the podcast earlier in the season. She was talking about mental visualization and the work they do there. How much do you think the off-court and mental health side has improved? I mean, I say in Adelaide, but I guess in 2017-18, mental health was still, I guess, a big deal. But the separating your work and personal life, how much has that grown since you, I guess, joined the elite coaching side of netball?
Yeah, I think it's the well-being side has always been something that has been pushed probably over the last 5 to 10 years. It has been something that is present, but it's gone from being something that's a little bit tokenistic to being something that is actually really respected and appreciated for how important it is. And I think the drive for the mental health space and the well-being is now only high on the agenda because people are coming out and sharing their stories of just how bloody tough it can be. And I think there's much better support now out there for athletes in that space, but I still question the support that coaches get in that space when they have to carry so much weight and so much pressure and so much scrutiny that we underestimate the impact that can have on the lives of head coaches. And something that I've been really passionate about over the past 3.5 years is connecting in with other coaches and sharing experiences and getting an understanding of how they may have navigated their way through certain elements, because I think people forget so quickly that head coaches are human beings and they're responsible for a team of human beings essentially. But obviously, the buck stops at them in many different ways. So I think we underestimate the toll head coaching can take on coaches. And so I'd really love to see, that space and that support system improved. And that's one thing I'm incredibly excited about Fever. And one of the things why I say Fever's the right fit for me is the support they put around their athletes and their coaches and all of their staff to ensure that they have all of the resourcing, all of the support systems within their inner sanctum to allow you to be your best is something I'm incredibly excited by, because you can't be on survival mode at this level. You need to be thriving to be successful. And that's why I know Fever's an exciting place for me.
It's a pretty odd relationship, isn't it, between coaches and players in terms of a work dynamic? Like, you might be someone's manager in an office, but that's not as high pressure in the sense that you might raise your voice at training and that's a normal thing to do, right? Because you're playing a game and it's not the same as an accountant or I don't know, I can't think of another job, marketing person whose boss might raise their voice to them. And then again, going on from that, if a player gets contracted again from next year. That's kind of on the head coach's head. I got to word my questions better. And like how many minutes players are getting. Like in a normal job, that kind of stuff doesn't come up. So this is all, a great point that head coaches do have a lot of pressure outside of just winning and losing.
Absolutely. And I think, it's one of the things that I'm really passionate about with my head coaching is empathy and understanding. And it's for me as the head coach to really understand my athletes as people and understand them obviously as athletes where there can be similarities, but also major differences, and what it is that they need to be successful and to be their best, and also acknowledging what they look like at their worst as well and being okay with that. And on the flip side, for them to understand my role at a deeper level too, in terms of what I carry and what I need from them and etc. So that's why I think for me, the relationship piece in coaching has always been my number one value, because coaching for me is human being working with human being, and we both want the same thing. Therefore, if our relationship can be really deep, authentic, honest, trusting, etc. And it's not about friendship. It's about a working relationship that is robust, that is understanding, that is willing to evolve based on the circumstances and situations. And that's the stuff I love, when you can really make those connections, because that then equates to quality performances. So I've got a big job at West Coast Fever in developing 30 odd relationships with players and staff. So lucky I enjoy the relationship piece, because there's a lot of work to do there.
Dan, have you had any specific mentors in the Australian coaching pathway?
Yeah, I've had quite a few. And I think for me, I'm always willing to learn. Like, I'm a student of the game. I'm consuming podcasts. I'm reading books. I'm getting on Zoom and contacting people that will have no idea who I am, but we connect up and we talk coaching. It's something that I just love to do because it has a huge impact on my own growth. So I'm constantly seeking knowledge. So I got my very first opportunity back in the Adelaide Thunderbirds at 2012 under Jade Woodlands-Thompson, who was the then head coach. And she's played a significant part in those early days, and someone that, I still class as a very close friend and those types of things. And probably over the last couple of years, the biggest mentor for me would be Tom Patrick, who is a sports psychologist and a wellbeing expert and a leadership consultant. And he actually probably is one of the sole people that kept me afloat during my 2 years at Adelaide. He come on and supported me as my own sports psychologist and mentor. And some of the work he did with me was incredible. And he's obviously loved watching my journey since then. And when I told him that I got the job at West Coast Fever, he was just elated. And us chatting through coaching and him hearing my growth in wisdom and knowledge has been really evident. And so he's been a great, what I call a critical friend. He doesn't talk shit to me. He gives me the honest feedback that's required, but listens without judgment. And no question is a ridiculous question for him. So again, that's why I'm so passionate about the psychology, the well-being, the wellness, because I guess for a head coach, you need those coaches as well. And he's the person for me that is hugely influential. And, there's some great service providers and staff at West Coast Fever that I've already started tapping into as well, that I know I'm going to connect in really deeply with, and can't wait for those relationships to build too.
I guess it makes sense logically, though, when you think about it. If you have good relationships with players and they're the best person they can be, you would logically think you're going to get the best performance out of them going forward. So do you think that that's just a part of the game now across everywhere, or do you think this is a difference you bring to your coaching?
I think it's pretty common, but it sits with how much of a priority it is, because I know in my 2 years in Adelaide, my number one value was relationships, but I could never prioritize it because of everything else that I had to endure and do and whatever it might be. So, there's no secret, we're pretty under-resourced at Thunderbird. So all of us were having to carry a bit of extra workload that was out of our scope and deal with things that we probably shouldn't have been engaged in at all. So when that stuff kind of takes away from your core business, which is coaching and leading the team, that's where the challenge can really be. So that's why, again, West Coast Fever, I have the freedom here to really invest wholeheartedly into the people that I'm working with, my players, my staff, and know that I've got a team of 7 or 8 of us in the high performance department that have their areas to really thrive. So, I sit here today and going, my number one value as a coach is relationships, and I'm stepping into an environment where that value is prioritized by the whole department and the organization to go, this is why we want Dan here. So all coaches have it. All coaches understand it's important. It's just whether you've got the opportunity to prioritize it above anything else. Because I do genuinely believe how you feel about yourself and how you feel about others determines the extent of how successful and how far you can go. So when those relationships are strong and robust, no conversation is difficult, and you're willing to do whatever you need to do for the greater good of the team because that connection is solid. So it's something that I'll certainly be, looking forward to building with all of the players and staff at Fever.
So coming into Fever, you mentioned that you've got a tough job with, trying to build relationships with 30 odd staff and players. Not only that, I guess the fact that they made a grand final in 2020 and made the prelim final again this year. Are you excited with the squad you've got to work with at the Fever?
Unbelievably excited. I think the firepower in the team is as good as any other team in the competition, but more excitedly for me, the growth potential of the group is very exciting. When you've got the likes of, Sunday Ariang, for example, who is going to be a genuine superstar, and those types of players fill me with so much confidence that it's not just about here and now, it's about here and now and also into the future. So sustainability and consistency year to year is how you build success. And Fever have been on a journey of doing that the past 3, 4, 5 years. So it's such a unique proposition for a head coach like myself coming into this, where you can inherit a team and a program in such a healthy position. And the fact that Stacey Marinkovic, the outgoing head coach, is moving into the Diamonds, there's a really detailed handover happening between Stacey and I. So the transition for the club and the athletes is smooth, and the staff, etc. And that's unique because, I remember when I went back to Adelaide in 2017, it was picking up the pieces and the club was in all sorts. So very different experiences. But I'm most excited at Fever about the growth potential because what's in place is fantastic. What they've achieved is undeniable. My job is to get in there and find the opportunities for growth and adding value to what's currently in place. And that is an exciting project that, talking to the athletes and staff over the past week or two, just filled me with so much energy around where we can just make some subtle tweaks to hopefully make some big gains. But it'll be a challenge, but certainly one that I'm fully invested into.
Dan, I mentioned at the start of the podcast before we even started recording that I try to generally keep things light and fluffy and not too serious. I want to let you know I've actually got a sports journalism degree. So there is a journalist in me, and I'm going to put that hat on now. So just be wary.
Excellent. So I've got one too, mate, so I'll be watching.
Good. In an interview you did, I think it was with Sasha Shipway for the netball show, you were quoted as saying there won't be wholesale changes at the Fever. Now, the dictionary definition of wholesale as an adjective is done on large scale, extensive. So, obviously you're saying there's not going to be a lot of changes, but what's your definition of the word wholesale?
Well, it's a very good question, mate. Wholesale meaning there certainly won't be a lot, put it that way. And I think the perception at the moment from, I guess, the netball community and the general public during this time of the year, but particularly now where
Twitter,
everybody's off contract, it doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all and everyone's going everywhere. I think what people need to understand is that, there's a lot of clubs, most clubs that have invested into their players, and the players are embedded in the cities and the teams, and they're settled. So while it's exciting to talk about who's going everywhere, I think, the reality is there might be some subtle changes in each team, but you're probably talking 1 or 2 positions max. I can't see a team having, huge shifts because, I mean, the competition's so close and on their day, anyone can beat anyone. So it's really about adding value to what's currently in place and identifying where that value area is. And I know at Fever, there's a list management committee of 5 of us that have robustly discussed where we think we can add value and where we can keep moving the team forward. But also the reality is too, is for me, looking at the Fever team and the program, is it's had so much success and got 2 goals away from a premiership, 1 win away from a 3rd grand final appearance. So perhaps maybe some subtle tweaks in culture, environment, training content, gameplay might be what's required. So that's why no wholesale changes will be taking place, mate. So subtle potentially, but those changes could come in the program. We're still discussing all of those elements, but wait and see, I guess. Wait and see.
Speaking of subtle changes, how are you going to fit Donnell Wallam and Janelle in that circle?
Well, we'll wait and see what happens with the list first before I answer that question. But no, look, a lot of people, I guess, are interested in where Danelle's at, and I've had some great times working with her in the UK, and she's an absolute work in progress. There's no question about that. And Suncorp is a big step up compared to the Super League, so there's a lot of things that you need to keep in perspective with that. But I love what Danelle brings, and she's certainly in the mix when it comes to discussions, and we'll see how it plays out over the next week or two when squads get finalised.
Whether it's your squad or someone else's, would you like to see Danelle get a crack at Super Netball? Because she's obviously announced that she's not going to stay in the UK and she wants to come back home.
Yeah, she's on a journey. There's definitely elements in things that she needs to work on, like any athlete, to be fully prepared for the opportunity. But, the raw talent is absolutely there, and I think the hunger is there as well. And if it's not now for her, it certainly will be in the future. And she's got a very young training age. So she's only really, when I had her at Rhinos, it was the first time she's ever stepped foot in a gym. So when you think about that in terms of her development, there's a way to go. But like any athlete, the potential is there and the talent is there. It's just further enhancing it to make sure that it's Suncorp Super Netball ready and she's robust enough to handle those demands. But she'll get there one day. I've got no question about that. And it'll be exciting for Australian netball to see her in the green and gold too.
Speaking of that, obviously Danelle's an Australian product who's gone overseas. What are your thoughts on, like, I guess a bit of a bottleneck in the pathway that, because we do have so many international players playing in Super Netball, that we do have our Australian players going overseas. Now, by no means am I complaining about the level of international players we have, because the more you have, the better the league is. Totally get it. But do you think there's a balancing act that we could do to get more Australian talent in Super Netball, whether that's extending squads to 12 or, I don't know how to do it, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I was disappointed when the squads didn't go to 12, to be honest. I think there's enough talent in the country for teams to field really high quality squads with that depth, and particularly with the rolling sub, it allows coaches the freedom to have some more specialist players and some more diverse skill sets sitting on the bench to really change games and change structures and strategies. So I was really disappointed when that didn't come in. Not that I'm against 10, but 10 does put you under a little bit of pressure if you are having injury concerns. So I'd love as the first step to see squads go back to 12, and then obviously a bit of chat around, competition expansion, and maybe there is room for one more team in the league. And, if you get 9 teams, then you've got the opportunity of teams having a bye round as well to freshen up, because Suncorp is pretty relentless. So having that opportunity to manage bodies and manage loads is beneficial. So squads of 12 would be the first step for me. And then the next step would be expanding the competition.
2 things on that. When we went to squads of 12 last year, a lot of the players who were brought in the 12 then got a contract the next season. So it just shows that there is that room for having those players. Second thing, if we do expand, I have mentioned it a billion times on my podcast, but Hunter Jaegers is my vote, given I live in Newcastle and the heritage with the Jaegers. Do you have
That's very selfish, New South Wales. 3 teams in New South Wales, mate. Come on, how many do you want?
Well, ideally one where I live in Newcastle, but who would your pick be? Who would your pick be if there was another team introduced?
Yeah, look, I guess there's a lot of talk about, Tasmania. I think that the challenge for a state like Tasmania would just be the depth of the pathway talent to make sure that they're feeding in those players that are ready for that level of competition. That's certainly something I know they've been prioritising in a number of years to build that depth of talent. And it's probably been very difficult the last few years not being able to get those athletes exposed on national championship court. So, that's a logical choice. You really want to have a nationwide competition, essentially, don't you? So whether the Northern Territory is a suitable place as well, that could be something quite unique. And they've hosted some games up there in previous matches as well. And so does Tasmania. So those ones would be the two that stand out to provide a bit more diversity across the league.
Okay, so the headline out of this, Dan Ryan against the Hunter Jaegers. I'll take it.
Correct. Sorry, mate. No offense.
No, that's fair. And Dan, the last one I got for you, mate, I probably put too much emphasis on this, but I really love paying attention to what kits the coaches wear on game day. Like Simone and the Vixens generally go with like a tan slack and a nice blue kind of, what do you call that? It's not a shirt. What is it? A top? A blouse. Yeah, that's it. A blouse. At the Fever, at the Thunderbirds, you used to roll with slacks, white shirt and tie. Stacey used to roll with like the casual kit. What are we going to see you in?
Well, I think coming into this job, it's all about collaboration, isn't it? So I reckon we might meet middle ground, and I might go a nice pair of chinos with a West Coast Fever polo and get into that medium of sporting look meets businessman. I think that might be the way to go.
How fortunate were the Fever media team and social media team that when you signed, you'd already worn the green polo when you were coaching Northern Ireland? That came in handy.
Yeah, it was very handy actually. They asked for a couple of photos on file, and most of my stuff was all Thunderbirds, and I found one from Northern Ireland, and it was in the green polo. I'm like, gold, happy days. I'll enjoy this one. So, I'm used to wearing green, and I'm looking forward to wearing it for the next couple of years.
Perfect, Dan, mate. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a really fantastic, wide-ranging chat, and I think I speak for a lot of netball fans in Australia when I say that they and we are just glad to have you back in our pathway, working with our athletes, and can't wait to see what you achieve with the Fever in the next couple of years.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate the chat, and thanks for your time.